Hello, Doovid. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
How are you, man?
yeah,
I
thank
hope
God.
I hope I didn't catch you as you were about to end the stream.
I was going to wrap up. I checked. I put the link for Aquarium, but that's fine. I put it in the chat. So, fine. If you have any thoughts on the stream, have we spoken before? I don't
No, I've just commented in the chat, and I've been a long time subscriber. I guess since I've found you through Adam Green. It's been a couple of years now. But I was just wondering if I could get you to conduct an interview with me. I mean, I interview you on my channel someday on this exact topic because you seem to be the most scholarly person I've come across when it comes to the history of Freemasonry. And I'd like to have you share your knowledge with my subscribers.
Oh, sure, it'd be my pleasure. Are you anti-Masonic or neutral?
I am anti-Masonic.
So you're looking at it as a conspiracy?
Yes, I am looking at it as a conspiracy, but would like to have access to the raw history, the just the primary sources and the chronologies of their activities and how they formulated. And I basically was paying attention to about 3/4 of your live stream, and I have a few questions in mind, but they're a little specific and language related. And you're wrapping up, so I might email you or something like that.
Yeah, I'm Doovid. Why don't you put the comment on this video and just make one comment so I'll see you. And if you have Twitter, it'd be the easiest. I'm Doovid at Hotmail. I'm Doovid at Gmail. But I get so many emails or spam mostly that I may not see it. But you could put a comment on the video or Reb Doovid on Twitter, and we'll set up a time. I mean, we could even do it. I don't know. Tomorrow might be busy, but we probably try to do it right away or next week. And
At your convenience, whenever you're.
What type of, do you have content on your channel?
Absolutely, yes. I am sort of an amateur historian. I grew up in the Middle East. I speak Arabic. I'm a Muslim. I'm in Canada. I don't have any. I don't see. Basically, I'm a pro-Abrahamist, if that's a thing, because I see the world becoming more and more secular. So I like to look
one
for
video on your chat on my YouTube partner. I don't know if is that you?
Yes, that's me. That is absolutely me. Yes,
you in the picture talking there.
That's me. Correct. Yes.
So you don't have that much content. I mean, you have a bunch. Is it because
I have a lot of videos
you take down
under my paywall? My members.
Okay, you have a paywall.
Yeah, but most of my subject matter is history related and geopolitics. I've covered a lot of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. I've also.
Did you see my interview with Defense Politics Asia?
No.
Do you know Defense Politics Asia?
I've heard. Yeah, I've heard of the channel. Yes.
He became big. I was watching him from the beginning. I got an interview with him when he was still relatively new, but I enjoy all types of topics. I'm not sure if you saw in the stream, I was showing like the Epperson books. Like I had it kind of because I'm an engineer and studied physics, that had somewhat of a positive view towards Freemasonry. I mentioned like that Rock Me Amadeus song. I knew that Mozart was a Freemason, and then like the founding fathers of America, Isaac Newton, of the Royal Society. And so that a little positive view, but I got into Freemasonry through conspiratorial literature.
Okay.
And, so I say that a lot of the conspiracies are factual, where you could say that, like these guys got together semi-secretly and did something that changed the direction of society, and they were Masons.
Correct.
Positive and negative. If you're looking at certain things, negative. But I mean, that also includes like the Royal Society and the foundation of science, the creation of algebra, and I mean the creation of calculus and physics, and electricity and modern engineering was also done largely in secret by Masons, but also wars and possibly colonialization, like the role. But then there's also when I started actually reading firsthand Masonic literature, starting with Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma, I became pro-Mason. So I never got initiated or joined a lodge, but when I read Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma, I became pro-Masonic.
Okay.
And it doesn't necessarily, I'm not advocating Masonry, but I think I would say I became pro-Masonic. I think it's true that I'd seen the conspiracies, like, okay, there's some guys that did some stuff that maybe you don't like, and like, okay, if you're in the Middle East, definitely, God forbid, like probably like war and decisions that have negatively affected your country or people possibly were conducted by Masons. Probably people like George Bush and Donald Rumsfeld,
absolutely,
neocons, like Jewish neocons, are majority Masons. So a lot of people,
just to interject, I think not only is like current wars and a lot of the political events happening now in the world and Middle East, conducted by Masons. I think a lot of the archaeological legacy, how the Fertile Crescent is really important to archaeology and so on. It's funny how you don't.
They robbed those countries. I would say the British Museum, Masonry was the Egyptologist and the Babylonian.
Absolutely.
Like the British Museum, if you go there, they robbed the treasures of
Mesopotamia, Egypt,
and took it to the British Museum, and they were basically all Masons.
Yep, and to this day, I criticize my fellow Muslims, I guess, because you never hear about like a Yemeni archaeological team digging in Libya or a Tunisian archaeological team digging in Iraq. It's always like a group of Swedes or a group of Australians, and you don't hear about like there's no, or even local interest in their own history, and it allows for people who have sophisticated agendas to come with their own stories. And one video I wanted to make today, but I had some technical issues, was Petra. I don't know if you know about the ruins in Jordan, Petra, Jordan. I think that's the.
I'm not an expert, but I mean, most famous among Jews for King Herod, who was half Nubian and
Nabatean.
Yeah, and I believe came from Petra.
From Petra, correct. The actual ruin, the main feature that's always posted on posters, that little sandstone carving that's like a huge tourist destination in Jordan. I think it's a modern forgery from the 1800s, because if you look at it, they claim it was, constructed in 100 AD and by, Herod's people, the Nabateans and so on, who lived in Jordan. If you look at it, it looks pretty pristine for a building, and you're an engineer, for a building that is supposedly in the middle of the desert, exposed to the desert wind, should be eroded as much as the other buildings in the area. I'm not saying the Nabatean civilization is fake, because there are ruins in Saudi Arabia, in northwestern Saudi Arabia, near the Jordanian border, that I believe are authentic, and they're actually getting media attention now. One of them is called Al-Ula. Al-Ula is becoming a huge tourist spot, and I don't know, it's almost like a coincidence, because I made a video back in 2019. I might just make it public just so that you can have a look at it, exposing Petra being a 1800s construction, like a 19th century forgery.
That's only mildly interesting to me. I'm not that expert in archaeology. I mean, it interests me because I studied in Israel, and it's mildly interesting. I'm more interested in the philosophy and philosophical system, because I was mentioning that I could see that the Masonic conspiracies were largely true, positive and negative. And then I actually started reading Masonic literature, and I determined that there was truth to the Masonic system. And then even possibly like as a Jew, that I was heavily practicing Judaism at the time, more than today. I was living in Hasidic Brooklyn. That there was even more truth to Masonry than Judaism. That there was some permeating truth within Freemasonry that permeated the world more than Judaism itself.
That was absent in Judaism.
Well, I see that in addition, that say that Masonry is non-sectarian. You could be a Jew or a Muslim and a Mason, but like then I was kind of a Jewish exclusivist, and then when I started reading the first-hand Masonic literature, I decided that it's more likely that there's some sort of universal truth like Freemasonry, and that I still think Judaism's true. And so you could take the Judeo approach, like Enoch or something that Enoch or Noah gave this prophesied this universal system to all of humanity, and Jews have our own unique role. But it was from reading the first-hand Masonic literature that I think like the conspiracies could only be true, and Masonry could have only became so powerful with their God being the force behind Masonry. And so the Catholicism banned Masonry as a negative influence. I think a lot of Muslims are neutral. Like I said, that just what I was reading of the history of Masonry in India, that Muslims were initiated into Masonry before Hindus, and Masonry is semi-popular in the Middle East. I'm not sure if the official doctrine, like if like the Saudi Arabian royalty or like
I know there was
Jordan, or the King of Jordan, I believe, is a Freemason.
Correct, and the Bahraini king as well. The king of Bahrain.
So I'm not sure if there's disputes like among Catholics where there's some Muslims who say it's neutral, you can join if you want, or some even endorse it, or others oppose it and say it's forbidden.
It's a mix. The majority oppose it. I've heard of people claiming the Muslim. Oops. Sorry about that. That's an Amber Alert. Some child is missing. I've heard people in Egypt accuse the Muslim Brotherhood being a Masonic sort of creation or something that it came out of Masonry, Freemasonry, and say it's Qutb, who was the philosophical inspiration for Osama bin Laden and those guys, was part of.
I've seen the evidence, but I mean, say whether those people were initiated Masons, there would be evidence of it. And so, saying what lodge, when they were initiated, and saying they might have left Masonry. So I mean, obviously, Osama bin Laden's a billionaire. He was involved in a huge construction family.
Correct.
It's likely that he was a Freemason, but whether you're saying he was acting on Freemasonry or he learned some of the stuff and then went off the teachings, or say like, I mentioned there's the theory of universal brotherhood, but Masonry is generally sectarian. Even Albert Pike, I was showing his literature in America, was talking about just in the American Masonic systems, like the sectarianism in just the American rites, let alone the global rites. And like the Detroit Masonic Temple has, I think it's even called Muslim, or
the Moorish temple or something like that.
I mean, there's Moorish, but there's actually a Muslim room. It's spelled like in a way that's slightly different, but there's a Muslim order, and there's a special room in the Detroit Masonic Temple, for Moors and for Muslims that have probably been being used. I mean, Detroit is one of the first places where Muslims settled. I think even the King of Saudi Arabia came to Detroit before Saudi Arabia was founded. But the Masonic Temple, built in 1920s in Detroit, has two rooms, a Moorish room and a Muslim room.
Wow. That would probably
presumably they were used. I mean, that there were Muslims and Moors that met in the huge structure that had a grand chamber and then separate rooms. But that was the Vivekananda, or the universal religion, that you can't really unify. You could Masons. You could have a comparison of degrees. If you're like in the Middle East and certain corresponding ranking, and then the different orders of what does it mean to reach a higher degree, what types of wisdom. And if you're in the West or the Middle East, it's going to be biased in a different way. And if you have a Muslim-based Masonry, it could include like memorizing the Quran, as where someone in the West might have to learn like a handful of things about the Quran, but it'd be like elementary school level
Correct.
of just like what are the basic tenets of Islam in order to and as you become a higher ranking Mason in the West, you would slowly have to learn more and more about Islam and all world traditions.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, if you look at, do you see what I'm saying is like the universality? Like you said, the conspiracies are true, but there's also, Masonry is a global religion that is in all cultures and has, I'm not sure how many, probably tens of millions of members worldwide.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's in the tens of millions.
I mean, including every country, including the Middle East.
I wouldn't be surprised at all. I'm still at the stage you were at when you thought it was a conspiratorial.
But you never read any. I mean, have you read any first-hand Masonic literature? Because that's what changed my opinion. Specifically, Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma.
I've listened to Morals and Dogma as an audiobook format. I haven't read it in a hardcover book, but I've listened to it. And I was going to ask you about Albert Pike.
And you're looking at if you watch Adam Green, I debate a lot of counter-Semites, and a lot of counter-Semites know a lot about Judaism and read about it, and they're still counter-Semitic. So it's like, I've been reading the Talmud, and my opinion of the Jews is worse from when I started reading. I started reading the Talmud, and now I'm a Philo-Semite or something like that, and would say Semite. That's not necessarily the case. A lot of counter-Semites read hundreds of Jewish books. Like Adam Green at this point has read hundreds of Jewish books and listened to thousands of hours of rabbis, but he's still counter-Semitic. And so I guess that that would be the case with Masonry. But a lot of times counter-Semites turn into Philo-Semites through
that actually happened with me.
I kind of like the Jews now, and so that Masonry is the same way that you read enough about Masonry that you change your mind.
Yeah.
Or you come into I started investigating, it's worse than I thought.
No, the more I've looked into Judaism, I've become a Philo-Semite, and I see Judaism and Islam as being brotherly faiths, and if anything, Christianity is the odd one out when it comes to the Abrahamic triad. But my question was on Albert Pike. You said he made you more positive, or view Freemasonry more positively. I recall a passage attributed to him saying that he predicted the world wars and the agendas for it, and he predicted the Third World War would be based on religious-based clash, like Islam versus Judaism versus Christianity or something like that, destroying everything.
Yeah, I wouldn't read too much in that, because it's saying he's not a prophet. He oversaw initiations, and he probably said a lot of things in predictions and had a good feel for the direction of humanity, and said some things that have a lot of insight. But I don't think that he's meant to be read that way. Even that he considered himself like a prophet or some sort, that he was going to have some special insight to predict the unfolding of future events. Besides for having a lot of insight about humanity. And just say Arbane in the chat. If you actually want to become a Mason, you have to join your local lodge, like Judaism. If you're interested in Judaism,
correct,
you could speak to me online, but you're going to have to go to your local synagogue. So for Masonry, you could learn about Masonry, read some books, but you're going to eventually have to join your local lodge. And so, either just get a tour, show up to a public event that's open to non-Masons. If you have a friend that's a Mason, start asking about it. But, it's a brotherhood, and it has to be joined at the local level. So, wherever you're at, you have to seek out your local Mason, your local lodge.
Okay. Final question, Doovid. Is it possible I post this interaction we had on my channel and share it
no problem
with my subscribers?
No problem. If you want to schedule a date to talk, or if you want to I don't know how if you have paywall or subs, and if you want to leave out like a week or something to organize, to publicize it for like next week, or
Correct.
outsource questions or interest. I like history, but I'm more a man of ideas.
I can tell, yes.
I know a little bit about. I'm a well-read person. I read constantly, so I probably know more about history than the average person. But like military history, archaeology, I don't know that much about. Like the history of science, I know more about. And the history of ideas and how ideas kind of appeared in one place and spread and may have changed. Moving from one place
or
to the next. That's more my specialty. And then if you have questions like the history of Masonry, I've read probably like 20 books on it because it's a subject that interests me. Because like I read books on history, somewhat. I like biographies, but I like the history of Judaism. But like generally, I don't read much history. So Masonry was a subject that interested me. That I've read tens of books on the history of Masonry, and the known history of Masonry is mostly in Europe, and then you have like the spreading and how the British and that essay I read about how the British used Masonry in England. They did the same method in the Middle East. So all of the British colonies, they used Masonry in the same way that they did in India. Although there's certain, I wouldn't even necessarily say that Masonry was more popular, worked better in India than it did in the Middle East or Africa or other places. But I haven't looked into that much. Like India is something that interests me, so I looked into it. I haven't looked into the spread of Masonry. It's one of the things that's hard to find literature on. So you could look for first Masonic sources, and then it's hard to find good information because you have conspiratorial sources or pro-Masonic sources, and like credible history of Masons from academics is almost non-existent.
It's either really pro or really against.
Well, it's just non-existent because it's considered like a conspiracy theory. So like this is written by a scholar in India, and so but if you're looking for like a scholarly, like the spread of Freemasonry in the Middle East, I mean there might be a book or something on it or article, but I would assume there's probably not that much.
Hopefully be a neutral writing though. It'll probably.
Well, I mean academic. Like the article I read was academic. It was peer reviewed. It was published in an academic journal. And so like most of the books I showed were Masonry books. They're not academic. But
I've never seen any.
India was actually an academic peer-reviewed article that published in a journal. So I meant to find something about that in the Middle East. It may exist. I haven't looked for it, but I
haven't found anything. I've seen newspaper clippings and articles, but no peer-reviewed journals or anything like that.
And yeah, I mean, say like, okay, did you mentioned Bahrain, UAE? I don't know about UAE, like Saudi Arabia, but
I don't know about the UAE. Bahrain for sure. The oldest lodges were in Egypt, in fact, in Alexandria and Cairo. I'm not familiar with India, but I know
modern conspiracy theory. If you're thinking like George Bush and Donald Rumsfeld or something like that in the Iraq War, or even modern times with like Jared Kushner.
Yes.
I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if Kushner is a Freemason. I didn't look into it, or it's not public. But if like Jared Kushner in Saudi Arabia and that in the Abraham Accords, that really Freemasonry is what behind it. So
I see it too.
The Abraham Accords. Well, I was saying that that wouldn't surprise me if, including on the Israeli Jewish end, the common element in the Abraham Accord is Freemasonry. And that's how the Abraham Accords, and you were saying like, okay, I was actually a part of the Children of Abraham that in New York that was funded by Muhammad Ali Alibar of Emirates, who was building some of the stuff in the UAE.
Yes, yes.
He was funding an organization in New York called Children of Abraham that was just Jews and Muslims. Sometimes Children of Abraham includes Christians, but this one, Christianity is possibly idolatrous. Is just Jews, and Muslims. But I don't know if Alibar is a Freemason. Like in that vicinity, I was pretty low level. But it wouldn't surprise me at the higher level of like Kushner and the MVS that in Tunisia, UAE, all the countries that signed on for the Abraham Accords was done through some sort of
and the Abraham Accords itself, it's a very just the philosophy of it. It's very Masonic, right? The way they want to synthesize and like almost like
so if they are Masons, they're not going to reveal it till tens, hundreds of years later, and maybe there'll be a conspiracy book. So a lot of conspiracies focus on anti-Semitism and say that they believe that Masonry is basically the tool of the Jews.
Correct. Yes, I've read that a lot.
You're generally weaker. So I think the better conspiracies say that it's a conspiracy that includes Jews, but not. It's not a conspiracy of the Jews. It's a conspiracy that includes Jews, and Jews are just a percent of.
I agree with that.
Maybe it might be 10% or something, and then Jews might have the typical roles that we play, like in finance or banking, law. But if you're thinking like construction or like of all the players, oil, that Jews are probably at most 10% of the conspiracy. Even in the Abraham Accords, where that involves Israel, Jews maybe are only 10-20%. And even if you're looking at like Iran and the cooperation between U.S. intelligence, Saudi, UAE, and Israel, and maybe like Azerbaijan, in carrying out assassinations in Iran, that they're probably I would consider them Masonic, and it probably they probably is officiated probably like I mentioned the assassins, the few books I have on the assassins, that some Islamicists claim that Masonry, like some pro-Masonic Islamicists claim the Islamic origins of Masonry, and they say that modern Masonry originated from the assassins and then came from the Templars.
I've heard of that. Yes, the Ikhwan al-Sifa, the Brethren of Purity, were like.
So it's unclear whether the assassins were a Masonic order, but if you were pro-Mason, then you could claim, because the assassins are before the Templars, and the Templars are largely believed to be the first pan-European order, and they probably acquired Masonry in Jerusalem, and they could have acquired Masonry in Jerusalem from the assassins. But if you're a pro-Masonic Muslim, or even anti-Islam, if you're anti, say that the conspiracy of Masonry, comes from the Muslims. Yeah. Obviously, it's more likely to come from ancient Egypt or the mystery religions of ancient Babylon, and because they had initiation. So the most telltale side of Masonry is the rites, degrees, and initiations. And so I don't know, like Petra, I haven't investigated, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's also some understanding of however the temples in Petra functioned, that they probably had rites, degrees, and initiation. The Babylonian mystery cults, there's a lot of research and writing that they also use rites, degrees, and initiation. And so if you're going to use this pan-Masonic idea that anything that had these rites, degrees, and initiation was Masonry, and to say, well, is there some sort of God-created universal spirit behind these degrees of rites and initiation, or was it just some idea that maybe it spread, maybe it didn't? But if the ancient Babylonian mystery cults and the Egyptian Paro system and the Romans and the Babylonians and Hindus all had initiation rites, and usually 3 degrees, they almost all have the 3 degrees in record, and like the hieroglyphs. I think there's pretty clear evidence that they had some sort of 3-degree system of initiation. Is that some universal created by God, or are you going to try to historically explain why all these ancient mystery cults had 3-degree initiation system? I think the assassins had a 7-degree system that had your basic 3 and then 4 higher degrees. But saying just the fact that Islam doesn't have initiations and degrees, and
they have Sufi orders, but that doesn't.
Does that mean they're Masonic? Just the fact that they have degrees and initiation mean that Sufis and assassins are Masonic. You're saying it doesn't originate from Islam, and so if they're using that, or is it just some useful tool like the Italian mafia or something? They have initiation and degrees. Doesn't mean they're Masonic, or doesn't if you're a believer, you say no. There's a God ordained structure, and any organization to be successful follows this God ordained structure, and that's why I said that by reading the literature, I think that it's a God ordained structure, and because it doesn't make sense to me. In the same way, maybe you believe in Muhammad and the Prophet, like he couldn't have been written by a man. It makes more sense that God, chose Muhammad as a prophet than that it was a conspiracy of men and fooled a bunch of people. Like most religious believers, like Judaism, it had to have been Moses in the Exodus. He couldn't have fooled all those people.
Correct.
In the same way with Masonry, that that God creating Masonry is the only explanation that makes sense.
That it's a divinely inspired thing.
Yeah, and then from it, the Hindu expression was given over to different men in different places and times.
Okay.
So that there wasn't necessarily one prophet or messenger, but any person who sought out God, God responded to, and God was the force behind their system of degrees and initiations and the rites. So even if it was pagan, so say the intention of pagan deity worship is to worship God. So even if you're a monotheist and believe it's forbidden and against the Ten Commandments, but the pagan desire to worship God, even through idols, is still in connection to God, so that God would have reciprocated by awarding them some sort of knowledge of the Masonic system that allowed the pagan system to prosper.
Okay. Well, this was a wonderful talk, Doovid. I want to do this more, but with specific questions and maybe some questions my subscribers might have, from their end. So how about I message you on your Twitter and make sure it's not spam, or you said write it on your
I don't
comment.
get that many Twitter messages. So if you do Reb Doovid on Twitter, I'll see it. I'll have to accept it. But
Okay.
but I'll see it. Like my email, I get so many spam. Like every day, I get
Same.
30 spam messages. So I'd have to look through to make sure it's you and I see it. But if you message me on Twitter, I'll see it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was a very productive talk, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate it. I look forward to talking to you next week.
Sorry?
I look forward to talking to you next week.
Oh, likewise, Doovid. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate it. So our main. I'm not like a encyclopedia of Freemasonry. I haven't heard of these things you're talking about. They sound kind of random. Maybe I could look them up. I have these books that have dictionaries of this stuff, but you could probably just do a Google search.